Hi again, everyone. This is Josh from Taproot. If you're just joining us, I'm going to be the presenter for today, and we're going to talk about skilled volunteer support for small businesses and how you can access that through Taproot's special programming. So I'm going to go ahead and just get us kicked off here. We're thankful to have all of you on the line today with us, and we're going to go ahead and just dive into our content for today. So again, my name's Josh. I'm the customer success manager here at Taproot. I'm joined by my Taproot colleague today, Kimberly Schwartz, who will be covering the chat box during today's presentation. So all attendees are going to be muted throughout today's event, but we want you to ask questions or make comments in the chat box that you can see up there on the screen. Kimberly's going to be handling questions throughout, or will direct them over to me during Q&A at the end of the webinar. So we will have a question and answer session at the end with the last few minutes. So keep in mind, your question might be answered throughout the duration of the presentation, but if we get to the end and you still have an outstanding question, please drop that into the Q&A box. Let us know. We'll try to answer your question on air. If we need to get back to you, we aren't able to answer your question on air, we will actually take a record of this chat and figure out if we need to loop back with you or not. So feel free to jot down any questions you have in there. We do have a record of the chat, so we can follow up with you if we don't have enough time to get to your question on the call today. So I want to start off by giving you a little bit more information about the Taproot Foundation and what it is we actually do. So we drive social change by leading, mobilizing, and engaging professionals in pro bono service. So since the early 2000s, Taproot has partnered with over 8,400 social change organizations and 22,000 volunteers, totaling about 260 million in donated professional services. In addition to Taproot's pro bono programs and our own consultancy work, we aim to be leaders of a global pro bono network and are committed to advancing the pro bono movement through further research, education, and events. So throughout today's event, we're going to be covering first, what is pro bono? What do we mean by that? We're going to talk about why the need for pro bono, why it's special and kind of occupies a special place that's very needed in professional services and amongst small businesses and nonprofits, and what small business needs can be addressed with pro bono consultation specifically. We'll talk a little bit about designing your own pro bono consultation request to put on Taproot Plus, our online program. And we'll talk to you about any kind of exciting updates to Taproot Small Business Services, and we'll have a Q&A right at the end, like I said earlier. So yeah, let's go ahead and just jump into our first agenda item, which is talking about what pro bono is. So a lot of people kind of see this phrase and they wonder what we mean by pro bono and what it can mean for your small business. So we can break down this Latin jargon together. So for Taproot's purposes, pro bono is just short for pro bono publico, which translates for the public good. It means the donation of professional services to advance the public good. So we'll pause here for a moment. And oftentimes when people hear the term pro bono, they obviously think of legal services. But it's actually a lot more than just legal services. Pro bono is donated professional services benefiting organizations working to improve society. So Taproot focuses specifically on pro bono in the areas of marketing and communications, information technology, human resources and leadership development, and business development and finance. So those are kind of the four main practice areas that we facilitate pro bono work in. We think our partners in the legal field actually already do pro bono work very well. So we leave pro bono legal services and the facilitation of pro bono legal services to our partners in the legal field. So despite the fact that pro bono is oftentimes associated with the legal field, we do not actually facilitate those kind of pro bono engagements, but we facilitate pro bono mainly in those other practice areas that I was mentioning. So to help you maybe make it easier to understand how pro bono compares to more traditional types of hands-on volunteering, for example, stuffing envelopes or actually working at like a soup kitchen or something like that, the Taproot Foundation created this helpful diagram showing the full spectrum of common community engagement activities. So this chart is grouped by the common types of nonprofit and small business needs, and then the different ways volunteers can help support them. So again, this counts for nonprofits, but it can also be viewed this way similarly from a small business working in the community. So at the top is a very simplified categorization of an organization's needs. We see making budget, extra hands, and infrastructure and leadership. So making budget is fairly obvious, having the funding you need to run your organization's programs or stay in business. Extra hands is referring to just the need to deliver services and programs directly to the community. And oftentimes, volunteer support is used in that regard. So, this is kind of where we get into the vein of traditional volunteerism. And then we have infrastructure and leadership. This means having those critical components in place that are the backbone of a healthy institution. So that's where pro bono expertise and service actually comes into play, along with board service. So pro bono falls under this third bucket. And as we mentioned before, it involves providing professional expertise and professional services to support the organization itself. So I want to really hammer home the point that despite the popular belief, pro bono is definitely not just for lawyers. Nonprofits, small businesses, public schools, and public institutions have a need for just as many types of professional expertise as large corporations do. And we at the Taproot Foundation want to empower those organizations with the same type of resources that those larger groups have. So we know just how powerful pro bono support can be for organizations facing tough challenges. In our 2016 State of Pro Bono Service Survey, we found that an impressive 98% of nonprofit professionals reported that pro bono support helped them be more effective as an organization. We also want to speak to the actual value of pro bono support. So, through a study we completed with chief executives for corporate purpose originally in 2015 and using refreshed data in 2019, Taproot has determined that the average value of an hour of pro bono service across the board as an average is about $195. These hours can definitely add up, leading to thousands of dollars of in-kind support for your small business. So through the webinar today, when we say pro bono is a valuable tool, we obviously really mean it. So by infusing the use of skilled volunteer support throughout your operations and strategy efforts, you can save money on your bottom line while capacity building towards longer term stability as a small business. So pro bono engagements are successful when there's a right match between the needs of the small business or nonprofit and the skills of the volunteer. This means the successful pairing of your organization's needs, i.e. the actual professional advice needed, with the actual advice needed, the bandwidth that you have available to meet with the volunteer, and the scope of the outcome you want from the pro bono engagement with a volunteer who has the professional expertise, time availability, and interest in your mission or work. And that's where Taproot comes in. So you see here, we're kind of occupying this intermediary block between the skills of a volunteer and the needs of a small business. And before I get ahead of myself with talking about the Taproot pro bono process, I want to first make sure to address the need for small business pro bono in particular. So small businesses are vital contributors to local economies, employing nearly half of all working individuals in the United States, but it goes well beyond that. So your organizations provide an entry point into business for entrepreneurial individuals looking to make a way for themselves. Oftentimes, small businesses really make up the fabric of their communities, from the corner store grocer or cafe to the neighborhood baker or barber. So small businesses are culture bearers that bring vibrancy and life to villages, towns, and cities across the country. And I don't think I'm going to really shock anyone on this webinar when I say that the last 2 years have been very tumultuous for our communities. The ongoing contingencies around the COVID-19 pandemic and its lasting effects have really rocked small businesses. And the events of the last few years have shined a spotlight on the longstanding systemic issues with things like racism that have held back Black and minority owned businesses for so long. And so the point here we're trying to make is that small businesses across the country need urgent support. And Taproot knows how powerful pro bono can be, especially when delivered to an organization when they need it, whenever they are wherever they're located. And we truly believe that the stronger your small business is, and the stronger our communities will become. So, for over the past few years, we've worked to expand our corporate advisory services programming beyond just nonprofit beneficiaries to include specialized small business pro bono as well. And starting during the summer of 2020, we began leveraging Taproot Plus, our online skills based volunteerism program, to make virtual volunteer support available to businesses in need as well. So, Taproot Plus is Taproot Foundation's matchmaking program that connects nonprofit organizations and now small businesses to targeted pro bono support. So, last year alone, nonprofits and small businesses connected with Taproot Plus volunteers for over $6 million in free services. That is $6 million that was then reinvested in our communities, that you all, nonprofits and small businesses, were able to take back. And through Taproot Plus, you'll have access to industry experts in HR, technology, marketing, finance, and strategy via a program we call sessions, which are 60-minute conversations to troubleshoot challenges and brainstorm solutions. So these consultations are virtual and totally customizable depending on the advice, brainstorming support, or problem solving that your small business is looking for. So your volunteer that reaches out to support you will provide free, high quality consultative support to help you tackle the issues affecting your business. We designed Taproot Plus to be flexible and nimble, so any nonprofit and now small business can get skilled volunteers no matter how big they are, and any business professionals can support said organization no matter where they're located. And it's completely free to use. Your small business will never pay a fee for using Taproot's program or resources. And this is Taproot's way of scaling up the pro bono movement and making sure all those who have need for experienced volunteer support have a way to access it, oftentimes virtually, safely from your own home or in your workplace. And we specifically also just want to call out the support of Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Businesses and MetLife Foundation for their support in making Taproot Plus available for small businesses. We wanted to spotlight that as well, because obviously expanding our reach to support small businesses, we as a nonprofit ourselves need extra support. So we wanted to just take a moment to acknowledge that as well. But now I want to dive into kind of the little more nitty gritty of how you could actually use our online program. So to get started using Taproot Plus for small businesses, all you need to do is pull up a browser, head over to taprootplus.org. There's also a ribbon that's appearing at the top of your screen right now, which should take you to Taproot Plus automatically so that you can peruse the site and sign up if you'd like. So once you get there, you hit sign up to register as a small business. Then we'll need for you to tell us a few details about the organization you work for, the small business you're with. And I want just to call out here that what we require right now while you're signing up is for you to supply us with your EIN. So make sure to try and have that on hand when you're signing up as well. When you're signing up, the kind of registration process is going to look a little bit like this. So we're just going to ask you some basics about your business, your organization. And then we're going to ask you why pro bono, why you need to receive pro bono assistance in general. And then that's essentially it in terms of the things you need to do to register on Taproot Plus. It's pretty simple. We are going to ask you to confirm your email address. So be on the lookout for that email, as well as you can't use Taproot Plus without getting that confirmed. If at any point you have trouble getting your email address confirmed, you can reach out to our help desk and we'll give you that address at the end of the presentation today, so you can email any questions you might have there. And then you'll walk through a quick onboarding to the platform that'll look something like this. And this is full of helpful instructions and links to prepare you to make the most of virtual pro bono support through Taproot Plus. And it will be a good reminder of some of the content we're covering right now that we've already shared. And so now I want to talk about kind of the fun part, which is telling Taproot what support you're actually looking for. So let's talk about what the process of requesting a consultation session actually looks like. So once you get set up on the site, you'll be able to then select the option for a consultation session. You'll want to make sure you're selecting the option for a consultation session. While we're kind of in the middle of expanding our site, you might see some other options up there right now. But we want to make sure that you're directed specifically to the sessions offering for small businesses. So just keep that in mind and pardon our dust while we work to clean up the site and make those improvements. But once you get to that session request form, as we call it, we're going to ask you a few questions. And it's important to just take a moment to invest some time in this because you want to make sure to make the right pitch so that you can attract a skilled volunteer who wants to link up with you for an hour and talk about your needs. So, the first question on the session request form is simply going to be, what area of expertise do you need support in? So, we provide you at this point with a drop down menu of wide ranging options from accounting to website design. So, you'll be able to pick automatically from the drop down menu. No need to write anything on your own just yet. The second question we're going to ask you on the session request form is, what kind of advice are you looking for? So, as we discussed, sessions are wonderful for many things, especially immediate problem solving, brainstorming, training on maybe a software or app that you're using, project planning, and things like that. You'll need to select your preferred advice from another drop down menu. So if your session topic bridges two options, for example, a social media session on ideas to optimize your Facebook page for engagement may include both training and brainstorming. Just choose the option that speaks to your highest priority goal of this call with the volunteer that you have right now. So you might need to like whittle it down to like what's the biggest area of need there. Go ahead and pick the one kind of at the top, the thing that hurts most, as I like to say. This piece is especially helpful for a volunteer to see in advance so they can prepare to deliver exactly what you'll need during this 60-minute consultation session. The third question on the sessions request form is just going to be, what skills are the most important to you? So you'll select an option off of a drop down menu, and this allows you to get more granular on the skill set expertise that you're hoping to leverage during this consultation call with a volunteer. It also helps Taproot Plus put your volunteer opportunity in front of relevant skilled business professionals. So we do the way our system works is we help curate our marketplace via these skill sets. So the types of volunteers that have the right skill set for your need, we want to make sure to get those needs that fit their skill set in front of them specifically. So designating skills here helps do that. So our system can, know, okay, who do we need to put this in front of? Who do we need to get eyes on this? If it's an HR need, we want to make sure to get it in front of HR professionals, not necessarily someone who's doing web design. And then the last question on our session request form, and this one is actually a free response question. So you want to put a little bit of time into this, is what do you specifically want to address during this session? What's your goal for the time with the volunteer? Again, this is the only free response question that you're going to have to answer, but you want to invest a few minutes in doing it so you can make a good, clear, concrete pitch. And the person that you're pitching has a clear idea of the goal of the call, what you want to walk away from this call with. We recommend keeping this to around 2 to 4 sentences, maybe a paragraph at most. If you find yourself elaborating past that point, your need might be a little too big for a 1 hour session. So you might want to just kind of think about, again, what's the highest priority. Keep in mind that you can always post multiple sessions as well. So if you want a second opinion or you have a different kind of follow-up question, you can post that session. So it might be related to what you're discussing in this session. But if you find yourself kind of describing and going on for a while, You want to just keep eyes on that because an hour sounds like a good deal of time, but many people find that the hour can go by really, really quick, especially if you're like really drilling down. So just be cognizant about that. You'll want to be specific about the advice you need. The volunteer wants to apply to an opportunity they can perform successfully, and let them know how you'll know if the session was successful. So I mentioned earlier, what the goal of the session is. What do you want to walk away after this hour of talking with a professional, knowing more about fixing? How are you going to know that the session was a success? Is a really good way to put that. So if you have an answer to that, that's great. Then you have like the perfect basis for describing this session. If you know what the goal is, I want to walk away with a better understanding of X. Then that will be helpful for the volunteer to know. You can feel free to share relevant links and details that the volunteer applicants may need to understand to assess your ask even better. So you can do that and take that extra step before pressing submit on your sessions request to scan for just basic grammar and punctuation editing. Make sure to just do some kind of cursory proofreading. Remember, these session descriptions, they're going to go out on a public marketplace, so you want to try and just put your best foot forward, obviously, when you're trying to secure pro bono consulting resources. So make sure that you're ultimately comfortable with what you've typed out. And now that we've talked about what you need to do in order to request a consultation session on Taproot Plus, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of that. Like I said, you'll want to spend some time doing that just to kind of make sure that you're describing your need well. So that's where you have to do a little bit of homework, but that's pretty much the kind of bulk of the process. So it's still pretty easy and relatively simple. And now I want to talk about how you can actually translate business needs to a consultation session. So I know some of you might think that this sounds great in theory, but how could it actually play out at your small business? So I want to just dive into some examples of how these 1 hour consultation sessions with volunteers can pay off for your small businesses and give you some ideas about how you could leverage one of these sessions. So a very, very popular area of support is HR policy advice. So review your employee handbook with an HR professional, get recommendations for what policies are out of date or what need to be added in. So HR is an area that I always love to pitch for people to post needs in because they can be very, very impactful needs. They often aren't necessarily on the top of everyone's minds, but given that it is about your people, the people that actually run the show, so to speak, it can actually be very impactful. This is always the skill area in which I highly recommend people post needs because we generally always have more HR skilled professionals in our pool of volunteers than we have needs going up for HR related pro bono work. So we always have a lot of HR volunteers kind of waiting in the wings. So I always recommend, if you post an HR need, it'll probably get nicked up, which is great because that's ultimately what we want. But given that we tend to have a lot of HR volunteers, they probably will be waiting for you to post something for them to take a look at. Another very relevant session for small business in particular, is getting a take on business model updates. So connecting with a strategy expert on how you can think through ways to modify your business model to make it more flexible in times of flux or period of low store traffic. This was very, very relevant, especially obviously during kind of the height of the pandemic. It's obvious, like a lot of nonprofits are still kind of facing these issues in the new emerging marketplace. Then number three, social media strategy, ever a popular need. People live on social media, obviously, and pretty much every small business has to leverage social media in some way. So you can kind of reach people where they're at by brainstorming creative, fresh strategies to engage with customers on social media. with a marketing expert who might have a lot of experience in social media strategy. So this is a very, very popular need. The one caveat I would put in that is because it's a popular need, it tends to be a lot more competitive to find those resources. So I'll try and call those out here when we run onto them. Is the ones where it can be a little competitive. Social media is definitely one of those areas because it's something that everyone is kind of going after. So another option that's maybe not on the top of everyone's mind, but can really help enhance your business is e-commerce platform research. Explore different types of online sales tools for your website with a web developer or an e-commerce professional to make the virtual purchasing experience for customers even easier. If you are a small business that maybe has a storefront and you're kind of selling, then this is going to be very, very relevant. Maybe you already have an e-commerce platform, but it's not firing on all cylinders. And you maybe want to figure out ways you could improve it. Maybe you want to get some ideas about other platforms you might want to transition your business over to, and need someone who has knowledge about what's available to you to just unpack, okay, here's our actual needs. Do you have a platform in mind that works best with those needs? So great way to enhance your business by delving into e-commerce platform questions and potential strategy there. Leadership coaching. So you can pick the brain of a leadership coach or change management expert for tips on navigating challenging times. So this could be especially helpful if you're considering shifts in your team structure or business model. This again falls under that bucket of human resources. So again, this is one that I would definitely recommend since we tend to have a lot of HR professionals. So keep that in mind, especially if you're the leader at the at the small business, then that is even more relevant because they can talk directly to you, and you can kind of just use it as some time to help improve your own performance as a business leader or business owner. Communications planning. So you can discuss the communications you'll need to modify, need to notify your customer base of things like product launch plans, changes in store hours, or updated services with an experienced communications professional. So in particular, obviously over the last 2 years, this was definitely necessary as stores had to make all sorts of modifications to kind of deal with all the contingencies of the pandemic. But this is pretty relevant, despite what kind of environment we're in. So this is something that is always a need that faces small businesses, is getting a communications plan solidified, similar to that social media strategy. Communications planning, I think, is a bit more broad, so it goes above social media, and it talks more about broad strategy with regard to communications. So things like communications with your own employees, for example, are a part of that, not just your potential customers or who you're serving. Growth strategy is another great idea to talk about with a professional. So looking to come out of the last year with an eye towards growth, you can set up a blue sky brainstorming conversation with a volunteer to bounce your ideas off of a strategy expert. So again, that's a very, very high level session. So you'll want to be a little more intentional with how you describe your goals, kind of the higher level it gets. So keep that in mind as well when you think about some of these higher level discussions, where it might be a little harder to describe what success looks like. So you might want to invest a little more time in crafting that actual pitch on something like this. Then last but not least, project management. This is something I feel like is a perennial need. It's always going to be relevant. Pretty much everyone always needs help with project management, myself included. So I love this one. So a session with an experienced project management volunteer can get you the clarity that you need to set clear project goals, communications expectations, implementation plans, and more for large scale initiatives. So maybe you're tackling a project that's coming up and you've maybe never managed this kind of project before. Maybe it involves, operating in certain types of skill sets that you're unfamiliar with, and you want to budget the appropriate amount of time for that or delegate things correctly. This is a good opportunity to just pick the brain of a project management expert to just kind of prepare you for what you're going to need to do. So each of those recommendations is a good fit for posting to Taproot Plus. So if you're created your account or are looking to create an account, you can start sketching out what your first session with a potential volunteer would look like. So if you have an idea for what a session looks like that we didn't cover in our examples, you can drop that in the chat just to kind of see where everyone's mind is at. So we can let what's possible through Taproot Plus. So we're reaching the end of our content here. So keep dropping any questions you have into the chat box since we have time for the Q&A. And as you think about any questions, I can cover what happens once you complete the session request form. So once you post that session, you can submit it to our marketplace. And once your request has gone up, it will get its own listing page on our volunteer marketplace, something that looks similar to this. From on our volunteer marketplace. And this is kind of an example of what it looks like when someone clicks into the actual listing on the marketplace. And they get some basic information about your nonprofit, the picture that you select, and then they can scroll down to see what we call the session overview. So that short answer question, or that free write question that you were crafting earlier. And we'll share your session with skilled volunteers by sharing it out on LinkedIn's volunteer marketplace, as well as our own marketplace. So we have a partnership with LinkedIn that allows us to share those out on their marketplace as well. We also have recommendation emails that we send to skilled volunteers that are in our pool. So we'll boost out your session request directly to volunteers that have the relevant skill set via email. And you can view volunteer applications to the session as they roll in, and pick the volunteers you wish to select for the conversation. Once you select a volunteer, you will have the option to close out the listing or keep it open. So you can actually, if you want like a second opinion, you can partner with up to 5 volunteers per listing that you put up on the marketplace. And Taproot will help you coordinate with the volunteer who reaches out when and where to connect for a virtual call. So you'll be able to manage all of those interactions through your Taproot Plus dashboard. So like I said earlier, we want to dive into some of the questions that have come in, but you can also find us at help@taprootplus.org. That's our help desk where you can reach out if you have any questions in the future. That's where we'll send communications, for example, if you've reached out or if we want to get back to you after the Q&A. So I want to just take some time now to start going over some of the questions that have come in. We've got a few that have come in. So I'm just going to take a moment to read over some of these, see which ones we can go ahead and answer here. So the first one looks like we have to unpack is how many staff members can have Taproot Plus accounts? Yeah, this is a great question. So really the answer is as many as you want. So when you sign up for Taproot Plus, the first person from your business that signs up for Taproot Plus will essentially create the business profile. And once that profile is up there, basically any members of your small business can sign up for Taproot Plus accounts. Once they plug in that EIN, our system will recognize it as a small business that is already up on our system. And so they'll actually be able to sign up a bit quicker. But as many employees can have accounts under your nonprofit's profile as you'd like. Keep in mind, though, that employees can't necessarily manage each other's engagements that are posted. So the person that's posted a session is the one that's going to need to manage it. So for example, you can't look at all the sessions that have been posted under your small business and, manage the ones posted by other people. So just keep that in mind. That's the only hiccup there. Another great question here. How many sessions should I request at one time? Are there any best practices? Yeah, I think this definitely depends on your familiarity with pro bono and leveraging volunteer support. If you've never partnered with a kind of professional skilled volunteer before, we definitely recommend just kind of dipping your toes in the water. I would actually say, if you're thinking about doing it for the first time, try out a session that's maybe something a little easier to unpack, something where that, again, that definition of success is easier to state, maybe something a little more discreet, a little more tangible. I need help with this function on QuickBooks or something like that. um, if you're dipping your toes in for the first time, troubleshooting calls like that tend to work really well because, again, a lot easier to define success. There is technically no upward limit on the amount of sessions that you can post, but we always caution, it's based off of what your own bandwidth can bear. So just keep that in mind. We're going to be sending you emails when people come in that are interested in your session. So it's going to take a little time to set up those calls and manage all of that. So again, really the only upward limit is just your own bandwidth for managing it. So another question is, any more ideas for sessions in the buckets of business strategy or marketing? Um, yeah, I think with business strategy in particular, in thinking about other sessions that you can possibly uh, go into there, I think those more discrete sessions, kind of like what I was talking about a bit earlier. When you're talking about business strategy, something we didn't talk about is kind of financial management, which is a part of overall business strategy that's really great for those types of troubleshooting calls, where maybe you have like kind of a specific question about how something works. And you're like, man, if I just had, someone who like was an accountant or something like that, that I could just run this by them. That would be great. But that's a really, really good example of a type of business related project, or sorry, business related session that makes a lot of sense. Marketing, I mean, when it comes to marketing, the world is kind of your oyster. There's so many different kind of marketing needs that you could talk about. We talked a little bit about social media, but there's plenty of other kind of areas in which you could figure out marketing. So we did talk about a little bit about project management. Something that's not considered with marketing, but you all might want to think about is, we kind of move into the new market of everything kind of being open now after such a long time with pandemic restrictions, is event planning and things like that. Or maybe, your business is just opening back up, in figuring out how to, okay, now we're opening back up. We need like a marketing push. Event planning is another. People don't think about it traditionally as marketing, but it falls under that bucket. So yeah, you might be considering that kind of thing, and running some kind of special in-person event, if you are in a community that's like reopened. So yeah, consider that as well. Um, and so another question is, I'm at a startup nonprofit that needs to build out their marketing. So where should they start? They're asking. Um, so yeah, I think some sessions that you could start out at, if you're kind of just starting up, and you want to build out marketing, you could use sessions as training opportunities for navigating social media channels. Um, Things like Google Analytics basics. I think if you're dipping your toes into marketing, you're going to find out that something like Google Analytics is going to become very important to you, because that's going to be the type of service that helps you secure the data you need to actually conduct successful marketing. So that's a big marketing component that a lot of people don't necessarily think about. Is the first part of any marketing project a lot of times is going to be just looking at data, right? You got to find out who's your target audience, what resonates with them, who's coming to your site, like who's visiting where. You've got to like make those decisions off of hard numbers. I mean, you could just start putting stuff out there and seeing what sticks. But most people are going to tell you you need to crunch numbers first as a part of like any successful marketing that you're going to do. So yeah, I would say try and become proficient with Google Analytics, and we do have people in our volunteer pool that can help you there. Things like content management, for example, are also great sessions to start out with marketing, along with the basics of setting up like an email marketing system. Maybe you're trying to decide between platforms like Constant Contact or MailChimp for your small business. What works what works best for you is going to take some figuring out. So maybe you just sit down with someone who's kind of an expert with email marketing, and you can kind of tell them, here's who we are, here's how we use technology, like here's what we need to do, and they can give you some recommendations for like what system is actually going to work best for you. That's a really good use of sessions, I think, is evaluating like which tool you should use, because it can be overwhelming sometimes when you're broaching a topic for the first time and there's like 5 to 10 different pieces of software or apps that you're trying to choose from, and you maybe don't necessarily know how to evaluate which one's the best one for you. That's a really, really great use of like a consultation session, I think. So someone pointed out that I mentioned there were a lot of HR volunteers usually. Are there any other categories where there are a lot of candidates? I would say, yeah, in those places I was mentioning earlier in the business strategy or in finance in particular, we tend to have a good amount of people usually that can help with financial things like accounting questions, financial modeling. Maybe for businesses in particular, doing like cost analysis is something that is very relevant for small businesses as well. So people who do kind of like technical business stuff like that tend to be fairly well represented in our marketplace as well. Um, so I also want to talk about, it looks like some people have asked, what if your session doesn't get a lot of visibility or people aren't, applying to it or reaching out? That's something that, we generally recommend, if you find that a session just has a really hard time matching with anyone. That's a time in which you can actually message us at help@taprootplus.org. There's a few strategies we can try to help maybe get that session up in front of more volunteers. The first thing that we're going to do is just take a look at your pitch and see if there's anything that can be done to maybe tighten up the pitch. We can also do things like boost sessions out to certain volunteer social media channels that we have running to maybe get a few extra eyes on it. So there are things we can try on our end to help shake things loose as well. So don't hesitate to reach out, especially if maybe a week or two has passed and you just haven't gotten any hits. So make sure to reach out to us if you have more questions and have a session that may be particularly hard to match. Yeah, another good call out here is there's people that had said that they had grant writing needs. And the kind of realm of fundraising is always a big area of need. We do have grant writers on our platform. I think they could be good to partner with, to ask them, maybe some basics about grant writing questions, if you're looking to try and secure grants. But there are other fundraising needs, obviously, that you might have as a small business. And we do have people that do business modeling and things like that, that could potentially help you figure out other maybe non-traditional avenues of fundraising. So obviously, if you're a small business, you have some kind of revenue or you're selling some kind of product or something like that. But there's people, especially business professionals who work a lot with nonprofits or mission-driven organizations, that know about all kinds of different other programs that you might not know about yet, that can secure funding that you can use as a small business or smaller organization to help secure funding. So obviously Taproot is, we kind of originally opened to help serve nonprofits. and expanded some of our offerings here to small businesses. So that means we have a lot of volunteers in our pool that are just very, very familiar with getting resources and fundraising resources to kind of scrappy, public good organizations. And they have kind of knowledge about where you can go for more fundraising assistance as well. So yeah, keep that in mind. Aside from kind of like grant writing being a big one, but if you're applying to any support programs or things like that, it can always be helpful to like get a different set of eyes on an application or something like that, and just unpack that for an hour to see if maybe they have any pointers. And someone asked, where should they start if they need assistance with the business model or the structure? So you're just starting out as an organization. Um, I would say that's a really good type of need to bring to a consultant. I would say, try and drill down on that. So if you're thinking about your business model, what's the biggest kind of pain point in trying to figure out the business model? What's kind of like the top or the priority? I would, to try and narrow it down, give them something to dig into. So, if you have something you can share with them during the call that you can look over together. Generally, the reason why I'm advocating doing that is because if you posted a session that just said, I need assistance with business model, that's still pretty vague. And so it might be harder to attract assistance because people might not really understand what's being asked for there. So I would just evaluate kind of where you're at. And I always recommend um, to not be afraid to necessarily like admit if you don't know something when you're requesting on pro bono assistance, because these skilled volunteers, they're the experts. And you could say, we don't have this skill in house and I don't really know, I have a question about this part of my business model, or just resources about business modeling for new business owners. Can you point me in the right direction of actual specific resources? Or can I hop on a call with you, give you the basic stats about the market we're trying to enter, how many people I have, what kind of startup funds that I have, and give me your best advisement on what we should start with when we think about our business model. Yeah, so even if you still kind of have more vague needs, there's ways to get specific in the way you're describing them, by going into that process of just saying, yeah, we need help with our business model, and here are the exact pain points right now. So yeah, never be afraid to kind of admit where you don't have a skill in house, because that context is really, really important for a skilled volunteer. And then another question that came in is asking about assistance with graphic design. Um, and so this one's a little trickier because sessions are usually kind of one-off, 1 hour calls. But it is a space in which you might be able to bring a few templates or things like that into a call and ask about, what their evaluation of those are. Maybe you have competing templates, for example, for like a color palette or a logo, and you just want to get a professional set of eyes on it to help you kind of make a final decision. That's a really good use of sessions for graphic design related needs. Um, there also is there is a way in which you could use sessions for graphic design by just maybe talking with a graphic designer about what your message is. So maybe you obviously don't have the skills or the talent to come up with your own logo or something like that, but you have the kind of the message that you want to get out there, that you're very confident about. A designer's not going to be able to, design like a new logo for you on the spot. But they could really take your base core messages, whatever taglines you have, about what it is you do, and say, you should go in this direction with a logo. You should use these items in a potential logo. And having that under your belt means that now you've left that 1 hour conversation with a much better idea of where you should go with your logo. So keep that in mind as well. It's a bit of a tougher nut to crack simply because you usually only have an hour and it's harder to like actually design something on a call. But also keep in mind that you'll have access to your volunteer's email address as well once you kind of match with him for the session. So if you want to send them items ahead of time to just look at in preparation for the call, that's definitely something you can do. So keep that in mind as well. That's another avenue in which you could think about leveraging these 1 hour calls for graphic design related needs. And I think that is it on the questions. Um, yeah, so I just want to take another moment to thank everyone. I know, everyone's time is valuable. It was great to be able to talk to you about this. And we definitely hope to see more small businesses online taking advantage of the platform. Again, reach out to us at help@taprootplus.org if you have any more questions. And we'll be available to help assist with those. So for now, I will leave you all to it, and we hope to see you all online. Thanks again for being here, everybody. Have a good one.